So welcome everyone to the Path of Awakening Buddhist Center's class on the Hinayana teachings. And we are now working our way through the first volume of the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma, which is the compilation of talks by Trungpa Rinpoche given at the Vajradhatu seminaries over a period of, I think it's either 13 or 15 years. And he would take students away each year, about 150 to 250 students for 3 months. And he would give talks. And these talks, every year, he divided the talks into the Hinayana for the first month, the Mahayana for the second month, and the Vajrayana for the third month. And these talks have all been digested into this 3-volume set. And we're on volume 1, the Hinayana, the path of individual liberation. Trungpa Rinpoche called this the foundational yana, and the teachings of this yana are foundational, important for the whole path. We never really leave them behind at all, any of them. So tonight we're going to go through chapter 4, opening to the true Dharma. I'm going to lead off, and then Michael is going to finish. So he starts about talking about what is the meaning of the word Dharma. What he doesn't say here is that in India, the word Dharma, even before and during the time of the Buddha and after the Buddha, had a huge range of meanings. And it didn't just mean Buddhist teachings as we take it to mean today. It meant many different things. In fact, the Ashokan pillars, which are very old, they go back to about 250 BC. These are pillars that the King Ashoka of India erected all over India with proclamations on them. They're sort of like they're stone pillars that rise up and they come to a point at the top. You can find them in different places in India. And the word Dharma appears on them often, and it's not referring to the Buddhist teachings. It's referring to, it has a variety of meanings. There is the lower meaning of the word Dharma, and then the upper meaning, the higher meaning of the word Dharma. The lower meaning has to do with things like way or style or system, basic norm, learning, what is perceived by the senses. This is all, I'm quoting from the text. What the mind can conceive, cessation of pain, what can happen in one's life. So for instance, you might talk about what is the Dharma of fire? Well, the Dharma of fire is to burn and be hot. What is the Dharma of water? The Dharma of water is to be cool and moisturize. What is the Dharma of air? The Dharma of air is to flow freely and to enliven sentient beings, animals and human beings and others. So there are dharmas, the Dharma is sort of the essence or the function of particular things in the secular sense. It's the thatness or the isness of things, he says. And he talks about the Dharma of food, the Dharma of fire, and so forth. How things work at the functional level. Also, it refers to common norms of general morality, Dharma, like not lying, not stealing, not killing, all these kinds of things. And the Dharma of that or the Dharma of this, okay. The higher meaning, though, has to do with psychology and the Buddhist teachings, which are all about psychology, the Buddhist teachings. Really, Buddhism is not a religion in the normal sense. It doesn't have a credo. It doesn't ask you to believe in something. It asks you to take words as being useful to a particular person or persons at a particular time or times and places. And it doesn't require that you subscribe to a set of beliefs like a theistic religion would, or even a pantheistic religion. So the Dharma really refers to the teachings about the nature of mind. And Barry, I think you need to mute yourself. So you're picking up noise. So it's straightforward truth, the teachings of the Buddha. It's about what happens in your life, the Dharma of how you relate with your parents or how you did, how you were raised, school, job, marriage, love, children. It's the Dharma of your psychology. Things as they are without too much art, sacredness, philosophy, poetry, etc. Very straightforward and ordinary. The Dharma of exploring life in depth means the Dharma becomes a path rather than a doctrine, and it requires greater vision. Handling the implications of our life simply and directly. Living things as they are, precisely and clearly. Not too philosophical, not too humanistic, not too poetic or artistic, or whatever. And then there is what is called the Saddharma. It comes from the word satya. Satya means truth. And when that's combined with dharma, satya, it becomes Saddharma, meaning the true dharma. This is the word of the Buddha. This is what we study. These are the doctrines of Buddhism that teach us new ways of understanding who we are and what the world is and how we might relate to it. And this has been practiced, this Dharma, for 2,600 years, since the time of the Buddha. I think we all know, I'll just repeat it briefly, the story of how the Buddha achieved enlightenment. And he left his family and his home, and he went and performed the austerities that Hindu yogis of those times performed, and they didn't get him anything. And finally, he took sustenance after he'd almost starved himself to death doing austerities. And a young girl brought him milk and honey, and he sat down beneath a tree. What's the name of that tree? Escapes me at the moment, the kind of tree it was. But that tree is still there at Bodh Gaya. Now it's called the Bodhi tree, the awakening tree, the enlightenment tree. And he sat through the 4 watches of the night. And during that time, he was approached and tempted by maras. Maras are tempters, demons of all different kinds. There are 4 main types. One has to do with food, one has to do with sex. I forget what the 3rd one is, and the 4th one has false promises of spirituality. And all 4 of these dharmas came and tempted him, and he achieved enlightenment. And immediately after his enlightenment, he felt that what he had discovered was not communicable in any easy way. And so he wandered, not teaching, for a period of over a month. And then he ran into 5 fellow practitioners who had performed austerities with him, and they saw that something had changed in him, that there was a fundamental sort of depth to him that they didn't understand. And they asked him to explain himself and to give teachings. And this happened outside of Varanasi in what is now called the Jeddah Grove. What's the name of the town? Anybody? Outside of Varanasi, what used to be called Benares by the British. I can see in your moment blanking the name of the little village. But he took them aside and under a tree gave them the teachings, the first teachings out of his mouth, which were the teachings of the 4 Noble Truths. The truth of the fact that there is suffering because we're not awake, we're unenlightened, we're confused. That there is a cause for this suffering, that there is a path leading to the cessation of this suffering, and that there is a cessation of this suffering. These 4. Actually, that's the wrong order. It goes the fact of suffering, the cause, the cessation, and then the path. The path is the 4th of the Noble Truths. It's the one he concludes with because, in fact, that's what we're going to have to work with. The path leading to the cessation of suffering. And this is the beginning of the true Dharma, the Satya Dharma, truth or suchness. It is that which tames the mind, this Saddharma, meaning the poisons, the 3 poisons that we have, which are aggression, passion, and stupidity or ignorance, ignorance is a bad translation, indifference. And the idea is that when one is immersed in ignorance, in confusion, and in suffering, one believes in the existence, the true existence of oneself and of others. And as long as one operates that way, one is engaged in continual dramas, relational dramas between me and all these others. And the three possibilities of relationship are that you want to pull something to you, you want to push it away from you because it's inimical to your well-being, and that you're indifferent to it. These are the three poisons. Pulling it to you is passion, pushing it away from you is aggression, and the third one is usually translated as ignorance, but then again, a better translation would be indifference. Ignorance is a word that's also used for the fundamental ignorance of confusion, where it means not seeing the truth, not seeing reality, avidya in Sanskrit. And the word for ignorance of the three poisons is a totally different word, moha, which means really indifference. So, the Dharma cleanses the mind of these three poisons and of the related kleshas. Klesha means defilement, Klesha. And these are really associated with the six realms, are the six passions, six emotions. With the God realm, it's pride. These are the kleshas. And with the jealous God realm, it's jealousy or envy. The human realm is lust and passion. And the animal realm is stupidity, in the sense of sort of eating whatever comes in front of your nose. And the Preta realm, the realm of the hungry ghosts, is a feeling of utter poverty and feeling that you're going to starve to death. And then finally the hell realm, which is the realm of hatred and aggression and fear. And these are the kleshas. And the Dharma cools the mind from these kleshas. It cools off or pacifies the mind with its three poisons and kleshas. This is the purpose of the Buddhist teaching, to tame the mind, medicine to cool off the heat of samsara, or neurosis. That's what Trungpa Rinpoche liked to call this neurosis. He really, wherever Buddhism has gone, it has found a congenial translator of itself into the culture of that country. So when it went to China, the congenial translator was Taoism. And it adopted Buddhism adopted a lot of Taoist vocabulary. And when it went to Japan, the translator was really Japanese culture, and you got the samurai ethic and the Japanese arts, all translating and embodying Buddhism. And in each country, it looked for a cultural translator. In the United States, Trungpa Rinpoche picked psychology. It was a natural. And so he calls the Atman, that sense of self, which Buddhism says doesn't actually exist, he called it ego. And I've said this before, but forgive me if you've heard it. I went to the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, one time and looked up the word egolessness. And the OED shows you the provenance of words, where they come from. And it attributed egolessness to Trungpa Rinpoche. How about that? I think that was pretty cool. So, and then he also, he used the word neurosis for the confusion of samsara, of the confusion of being unenlightened, an unenlightened person. And it is genuine, the Dharma, the Sad Dharma, because it begins to affect your mind fundamentally. How? You begin to cut through all the beliefs and the stories that lie in our unconscious and come conscious and fill our days and act like a lens through which we see the world, and you begin to cut through that. How? Through the practice of meditation, both on the cushion and in daily life, and through study, which buttresses your practice. At the same time, the Dharma doesn't fit into your thought patterns, does not cooperate with ego. It terrifies you a little, because it does not allow any ground to indulge in your ego. And in the other class, we've been talking about how the teachings fundamentally undercut the story that we tell about who we are, who I am. And we have all these stories that we've been telling ourselves forever and which come up continually in our consciousness in small ways and big. And the Dharma undercuts this. And I've heard in the group discussion that people find that disconcerting, that they're going to have to give up their story of who they are and that the Dharma may produce that effect. Because these stories of who we are and where we're going and how we live, all of that has a sense of security to it, that when the Dharma comes in contact with it in the beginning, it can actually produce a feeling of discomfort, of fear, of anxiety. There is the aspect of Dharma that fits with our egoistic expectations and predilections, and we're emotionally attracted to it. So, I mean, you know lots of people who teach the Dharma and they're sort of using it as a way of bolstering themselves. It's subtle. It can happen to all of us. And we are emotionally attracted to it, he says, to the Dharma in this way. There is the aspect of Dharma which appeals to our intuitive wisdom. You hear it and it makes sense. It appeals to something deep inside you, beyond ego. Both aspects are present, and the path is to let go of the first, the feeling of being fascinated by, entertained by these teachings. That you're going to sort of wear them like ornaments and bolster your self-image, perhaps your ego. And that we give up. And the second one, where it appeals to our intuitive awakening, that is what we cultivate, that is what we go towards on the path. It's based on wiping out our habitual neurotic patterns of being inspired by the Dharma insofar as it fulfills our neurotic expectations. And we keep the part of being inspired because Dharma is related to our inherent insight. He says this sorting out process generally takes place through sitting meditation as well as the feedback of the teacher and Sangha who refuse to cooperate with your ego. And boy, can the teacher refuse to cooperate with your ego. And the Sangha. So that helps. That helps us, come into alignment with these teachings. And this produces people who have genuine insight, a connection to the true Dharma, and will proceed on the path as opposed to those who do not and will not. So our connection to the real Dharma is based on pure intuition, rather than ego's more logical desires for a secure situation. You hear it and it just makes sense. It appeals to your intelligence in a very profound and direct way. It's like a blow, almost like a hammer, saying, yes, this is the way it is. Although it can be weaker too. There can be little things like, oh yeah, I think that's right, sounds right. He says, the fundamental meaning of true Dharma is passionlessness, peacefulness, and non-aggression. This is what we experience when we come present out of the machinations of ego, which are always about wanting to get something, not being peaceful, and being aggressive. He says the real truth is not actually spoken fully. Rather, it is somewhat implied. It is powerful and thought-provoking. And this happens a lot as we listen to the teachings and as we practice, that we begin to get feelings of what the Dharma actually is and what the truth is that we can't quite find in words. And we're waiting for it, but it's roiling in us, it's bubbling. He says, eventually the Buddha taught thousands of people at a time, and everyone got something out of it because it was the living truth, presented with honesty, authenticity, and sincerity. So everybody who hears this hears a different part of it slightly, hears it slightly differently according to their own predilections and openings. Finally, in this section, he says, Sadharma, true Dharma, has the quality of universality. Millions could understand it. It transcends the three worlds and the kleshas. The three worlds are the world of desire, which is the world where we live. It's the world of the six realms, hell realm up to God realm. And then there's the realm of the gods of form, which is really sort of an idealistic place in our minds. And then there's the realm of the formless gods, which is a very blissful place, sort of a trance state place. He says, the Sadharma transcends all of these. And then he finally says, once you recover from the kleshas, wow, that's something to do. Life is very simple. You are born, you get old, you get sick, you die. That is Sadharma, the truth. So the contents of Sadharma that we have to work with, this is all sort of the beginning of the path, or the beginning of introducing us to the path. The contents of all Sadharma are three things: Shila, which means discipline; Samadhi, which means resting in pure meditation; and Prajna, which is transcendent understanding, or he calls it discriminating awareness, wisdom. It's what you see with the eyes of truth, how you see. And these are all have to do with training your mind, waking your inherent capabilities. It's proclaimed through these three things. The contents of all Sadharma taught by the Buddha is proclaimed through Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. It's not a matter of bringing in a belief in a foreign element like God. He says the Holy Ghost, Shiva, whatever. You're awakening to your own inherent capabilities. Discipline, Shila. This is really having to do with getting straight, coming back from the dreams that inhabit our minds and that drive us. These dreams, oftentimes they animate us, they take us in certain directions, they cause us to act in certain ways, say certain things, think certain thoughts. And what Shila is coming back to awareness. It's like, he says, it's like taking a shower and putting on clean clothes. You get rid of all this detritus, of mental detritus, of beliefs, intentions, plans, schemes, ego-driven. You could be wholesome, free from fetters, free from wandering mind, present, on the dot. This is the true meaning of Shila. Mindfulness plays an important part in this, obviously, because you're coming back from all the dreams. He says, before you can conduct yourself with decency, you have to be able to maintain this peaceful, mindful state of being. Otherwise, we're constantly acting out of hidden agendas. How many times have you spoken to someone and they said one thing that you could tell just by looking at their face that they were thinking another? Hidden agendas. We all have them. True discipline, Shila, is dropping all of that, is coming completely present and being right here, honest. He says you have to be able to calm yourself down with mindfulness in order to have, in accordance with common sense. The attitude of Shila is upright and good, like deciding to take a shower and getting all the dirt off and washing and pressing your clothes, and you feel dignified and wholesome, genuinely, not puffed up. We start by mimicking it, but it becomes real. And that's interesting. We actually become it, willy-nilly. And he gives the analogy of a young lion eating meat. We have the instinct, just like a lion does. The young lion doesn't know to eat meat, and its mother or father or parents put it in front of it, and the lion tastes it, and it rouses the instinct that it wants to eat the meat. It's just so with Shila. We have this instinct towards wholesomeness, towards being clean, a clean mind, an open mind, a free mind. And this is what we are arousing when we listen to the teachings and when we practice meditation. So we are all would-be bodhisattvas, enlightened beings. And when he says, whenever we try to mimic or emulate the Buddha, we are actually practicing real Shila. And he says it's unlike the Victorian idea of good manners, like how you handle your knife and fork and what you say and all that, which was so stilted. We are organically tapping the source of true Shila, which is awakeness, mindfulness, being here. He says true Shila happens to you. If you go through the pain of sitting for a long time, like in retreat, there is something beyond the pain. You actually learn how to sit fully and properly and to think like the Buddha, at least in small doses. He says, without discipline, life is made up of successive indulgences. And even though it's our basic nature, but if we ignore it, then we're just involved in one indulgence after the next and confusions as well, based on aggression, passion, and ignorance, the three poisons again. If you lack discipline, life becomes a joke and is not worth living, he says. The accomplishment of discipline is based on renunciation, which is inspired by experience beyond samsara. And that renunciation and that experience beyond samsara comes to us through the teachings and especially through our meditation practice. As we sit, watch the breath go out, we let go of thoughts, that's the renunciation of all thought, and we just come back into this pure awareness here in the present moment, however much or little. The Shila principle is based on waking up a natural instinct towards sanity, of being here now. As Dan says over and over when he leads the meditations, be here right now. This is where our natural instinct leads us. It is never imposed at any level, though sometimes it might seem so, but we are always dealing with what we intrinsically already have. It's already here. We're just getting rid of the detritus that covers it up. Meditation, samadhi. The word for this in Tibetan, the word for discipline, I don't know if I said it, is shila. In Sanskrit, sultram in Tibetan. The word for meditation in Sanskrit is samadhi. In Tibetan, it's tingzen. Tingzen means, ting is stillness, and zin is holding. So you're holding your mind in stillness. This is the meaning of meditation, fundamentally. You don't hold on to your preconceptions, and you have a state of mind that is clear, precise, relaxed, for however long you can do it. Might just be a second, might be minutes. It comes and goes as we practice. We forget, we lapse off into dreams, and then we come back. Shamatha, this is the meditation, samadhi is made up of these two practices, shamatha in Sanskrit and vipassana. In Tibetan, the shamatha is shine, which means dwelling in peace. Shi is peace, ne means to abide in or dwell. And he says with shine or shamatha, you develop concentration and one-pointedness. And as I've said so many times, it has these three benefits, shamatha, of, on the one hand, you realize when you try to practice shamatha, you realize how much you're lost in thought. Most people don't even know, they're just lost in thought. And then you begin to, when you try to come back from it into awareness, then you begin to realize the extent to which we are lost in our monkey minds. The second benefit is that you get a rest, because thought is full of anxiety, always wishing things were different, planning for things to be different, regretting that things weren't different. And when you come back from that, you actually get a rest. As Organ Chögyam says in his book, it's like having a really good nap. And the third benefit is you begin to develop the muscle of recognizing when you're lost in thought and coming back. That begins to become a practice that you begin to develop more and more. Vipassana, in Tibetan, hlak tong, superior seeing, is expansive relaxation with a wider view. It means that having come back through Vipassana, as through shamatha practice, then you don't have to be aware just of a single thing like the breath or a candle flame in front of you or a mantra, as in transcendental meditation. You can expand your awareness to fill the space. It doesn't even have to fill it. It is it. You just let go and become this space full of intelligence. So samadhi means overcoming the constant search for entertainment. That's a beaut, isn't it? Don't we always search for entertainment? And you begin to cut through subconscious mind. When you give up that search for entertainment, even for an instant, you begin to cut through subconscious mind, which provides the obstacles to samadhi. Subconscious mind is constantly throwing up dreams of one kind or another. And you achieve absorption in the sense of complete presence, being fully here, there, all the time, 100%. He says, I'm lucky if I can do it for instants or minutes at a time. So, yeah, with wandering mind, we would like to take a break from awareness. We go off into entertainment. But with samadhi, there is no break. Meditation itself, samadhi, coming back to awareness, is a break from the pain and suffering of samsaric mind. So samadhi is deliverance, freedom, liberation, being there, being here, constantly, all the time, as much as one can. You are entering into a full world, a big world, a complete world of meditation. This is samadhi. It is a release from pain, deliverance. It is deliverance. It is freedom. It is liberation. Coming back into the present. Because when one really comes back, there are no boundaries. There is open space. We can do anything in this present moment relating to what is around us. We are in a constant dance with awake reality when we come back. A constant lovemaking, a constant conversation, a constant involvement. And they call this, in the teachings, they call this play, the play of the mind, ropa in Tibetan. So he says you're entering into the real world full and complete and big. You experience totality, being fully included, fully being. In the beginning, it's just in flashes, in moments, but it just grows the more you practice because it has to do with relaxation. It's not an effort. It's really relaxing into this open space, being fully and utterly there or here. And you can experience this on the cushion. You can experience this in daily life. Then he says, true confirmation only happens. True confirmation of that you're awake, only happens when you are inspired to become a real person, when you follow the teachings and do the work of the Buddha, the fully enlightened one. A real person means this person, rather than one that I've imagined in my mind that I think I ought to be. It can only happen when you see that you can transcend samsaric pain and work for the benefit of others, because those two go together. When you come back into the present and you transcend the pain of neurotic mind, then what's left is to interact with the ropa, which is to work for the benefit of others. It's their benefit because you're playing with them and communicating with them in the space of sane mind. Finally, the third one, knowledge and prajna. Knowledge, which is prajna. Prajna means, jñā is the root of the word to know, one of the words to know, and pra is an intensifier. So it's kind of intense knowing. It's often translated as things like, he calls it discriminating awareness. Sometimes it's called transcendent knowledge. And there are two types of prajna, lower and higher. Again, lower prajna means you're smart. You can do calculus. You understand biology. You understand chromosomes, whatever it might be. You have a smart mind that can do worldly things well. You're a good business person. You're a good accountant. You're a good lawyer, whatever it might be. That's the lower prajna. Upper prajna has to do with transcendent knowledge. And that's really what we're talking about here. Although the two both refer to the intelligence of mind. And what upper prajna sees is the twofold egolessness, meaning the fact that I and other are myths. They don't exist. Now, initially when we hear this, we think, oh, I'm going to see egolessness. I'm going to see the egolessness of myself. I'm going to see the egolessness of dharmas, as though it were some kind of real thing that you could finally get your hands on or your mind on. But actually, what they are doing, these two words, egolessness of self and egolessness of other, the fact that I don't exist and other doesn't exist, it's pointing just to this, what we're already sitting in the middle of. This is operating without these concrete add-ons of existence. It's just right here. It's alive. It's constantly moving, expressing itself. You know, the red of the sweater, the sound of the words, the heat of the room, whatever it might be. All of these things are arising. That is the real meaning of egolessness, that you don't lay onto it. As soon as you say, oh, I don't like that sweater, suddenly there's an I and an object, the sweater. And now you've got confusion. You've got ego and I and other. But before that, just in the bare awareness that we all experience all the time, it's always there. You can't shut it off. There is where egolessness lies, the twofold egolessness. And that's what prajna sees. Prajna means giving up these I-other games and seeing what's really here and relating to that in a way that you put on the sweater, you know, you eat the food, you talk to the person. So you see the fruitlessness of carrying around that extra baggage of I and other, love and hate, the three poisons, and all the other kleshas, pride, envy, hatred. And you discover that the awareness of what is happening, which is already here, is preferable to always looking for entertainment, always looking for some kind of activity to entertain ourselves and keep what entertainment's main function is to keep the I-other game going. Or put it another way, the I-other game going, that's main function is to prove that I is here and that is there. He said, you see the entire world with sharpness and clarity. In referring to another teaching, which I'm not going to go into, he says it's not cocoon. Cocoon is the way in which we layer around ourselves all of our ideas about who I am and who I don't want to be. And then we just get rid of all that stuff. You're able to distinguish things as they are, just here, right now, without any extra implications. It says clear-headedness, wakefulness in all the areas of your life develop out of shila, coming back, and samadhi, practice of awareness. You don't accept or reject, you simply separate things, he says. That means, you know, when you have You're eating your dinner and you're cutting with your knife. You cut off a piece and you put it in your mouth. You just separated it. It's that simple. You experience your life fully. No parts of your life are missed. Everything has a quality of sharpness and humor, and he keeps emphasizing humor. Humor is a delightful aspect of prajna. With humor, you are awake and interested in everything that goes on, and you are gentle as well. And the first time I ever heard him open his mouth was in New York in 1970, in a loft in downtown Manhattan. He gave a talk, and the talk was on sense of humor. And I didn't find it funny, and I thought, he's not for me. And then gave up on him right there. So since your discriminating awareness, your prajna, covers your entire life, and it does. It doesn't cover it, it is it. It permeates it. You know exactly what to do. You know how to handle your existence with tremendous humor and precision. All the Dharma that has been taught in the universe has the quality of Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. And with that, I think I'm giving this over to Michael.
Thank you, John. So for most of the rest of the chapter, Trungpa Rinpoche will be talking about the higher Dharma, Sat Dharma, although at one point he does come back to some of the different categories of Dharma that besides the higher Dharma. And in talking about the rest of the chapter, what I would like to do is talk about it some in terms of experiences that we might have had in meditation practice, not because these things can only be experienced in meditation practice, but that they're easier to recognize in the context of meditation. In fact, when I was first learning meditation, it was presented to me in different ways. And I remember one time presented as when we practice meditation, we create an environment in which mindfulness is more likely to occur. The significance of that is not that we create mindfulness, we just open ourselves to an environment where we're more likely to be able to recognize or settle into it. So if we can actually do that for a moment, one of the ways in which we create an environment in which mindfulness is more likely to occur is by taking a good posture, which allows us to settle, to experience some stillness of body, which supports stillness of mind. We make some effort to let go of any kind of preoccupation with thoughts, not in the sense of pushing anything away, but just not engaging further in further thought and just seeing thoughts as they come and go. And typically we pick a place to meditate where what's quieter, we're less likely to be distracted. So good posture mainly means straightening the back and then relaxing. And then taking a moment just to feel, open ourselves to how we're feeling in the moment. Relaxing as best we can. And then settling with whatever our experience is. Very simple. And in particular, to introduce a shamatha element, which is most helpful when mind is agitated. We can work with the breath, particularly the out breath. And just feel the breathing, notice the breathing. The breath only happens now. So when we connect with the breath, we're present. So we can just do that for a moment. You might also experience meditation as slowing down. We're always in a rush to get to the next thing, to accomplish something. But in meditation practice, again, we just allow ourselves to settle, let go. simplify to just this one moment, here and now. So the title of this chapter is Opening to the True Dharma. And I think one point in all the descriptions that we're being given is to help us understand what the true Dharma is. And this entire section of the book is entering the path. So that's what we're doing. And we start in the section of the book that I'll be talking about with the expression that Dharma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Good in the beginning essentially comes down to two words that Trungpa Rinpoche uses, fresh and joyful. And the sense of freshness is what we experience in meditation practice when we're able to let go and just simply open up. We experience a sense of being present and that things are fresh because we've let go of our ordinary habitual ways of relating to things and we're just open. Ordinarily, we see our ideas of things, not the things themselves. But when we're able to slow down, settle, and simplify, we're simply present. It's very simple. And in that sense, Dharma is good in the beginning because it is fresh. It allows us to open up. Dharma wakes us up. And in the sense of waking up, letting go, being present, there's freshness. And that's what he says. At the beginning, it's fresh thought. And it throws us back a little. It throws us back because ordinarily, most of the time, much of the time, we're not aware of this freshness. We're so caught up, preoccupied, and distracted that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to experience it. So again, there's a sense of freshness to Dharma being good at the beginning. He goes on to say that we begin to realize that somebody, the Buddha, the Guru, the teacher, has an entirely different way of looking at the journey, a different way of looking at things as they are. So this is what we experience when things are fresh. We actually come closer to seeing things as they are. This is a distinction that's made throughout the path in Buddhism, that things may appear to us in one way, but that's not necessarily how things actually are. Things appear to us in the way that they do because we get caught up in our ideas, our beliefs, and our preconceptions. But when we let them go, we can actually experience things as they are. And that's one continuity throughout the path, is coming to realize things as they are. So again, it's a question of waking up. And as we do this, there may be times, as he says, when we become nervous, confused, or concerned, but it's not a big problem. And he talks about this as the finger pointing at the moon, that at times we look at the finger rather than seeing what's being pointed to, that we can't always avoid some misunderstanding, but that the teacher, in trying to clarify misunderstanding, just gives us hints, because all the rest really is a journey of self-discovery. So it's not that we need to be filled up with facts or ideas. As he says, this would be too complicated, too many categories. Instead, the teacher just gives us a hint and this will become clearer again, I think, when we talk about Dharma being good at the end, that in the end, there's no fixed view, no fixed state of mind, that we're not trying to create any particular state of mind. Instead, the Dharma is really a journey of self-discovery, and that the teachings invite us to be curious and open, to let go, and actually be present with things as they are. So as he says, good at the beginning is thought-provoking. And he goes on to say that it's joyful as well, because it's truth. And he talks about how religious practices often can be kind of gloomy or pessimistic, particularly in theistic traditions, where he says the teachings are meant to inspire guilt and pain. But with the true Dharma, he says, we're completely free of someone upstairs. Since nobody's watching us with a long face, we feel joyful. But more importantly, he says, the Dharma is joyful to hear because it's luminous and delightful. That's to say that, again, when we're able to settle, we have moments of clarity, we have moments of simplicity, we have moments of freedom. As John said, one of the things that we experience through meditation practice is some relief from the anxiety of the constant struggles, the constant judgments, self-judgments, and all of that. And we come to realize increasingly as we practice that we set ourselves up, we tie ourselves in knots with our ideas about how we think we should be, how we think the world should be. And that, again, over and over in meditation practice, it just comes back to the very simple experience of being present, letting go, and seeing things how they actually are, seeing ourselves as we actually are, rather than continuing to be caught up in staleness of habitual mind. So that instead of staleness, we have freshness and we have joyfulness. And that's why Dharma is good at the beginning. He says that it's good in the middle, and here relates entirely to the notion of path. He says Dharma is good in the middle because the process goes along in a very ordinary way, that we have a sense that we're on a journey. So what's important here is appreciating the notion of path and the nature of path. Because ordinarily what we get caught up in is a sense of problem and solution, or some sense of need or lack, and then a goal. And that although this kind of thinking has its uses in other venues, it's not how the Dharma works, and it's certainly not how meditation practice works. That was another way that I was introduced to meditation, that when we practice meditation, I was told, we're not trying to create any particular state of mind. We're just trying to see what our state of mind is. What happens when we try to create states of mind is we end up in a struggle with ourselves. We end up with judgments about ourselves, judgments about our experience. And we're not able to be present because we're always looking for something else or something further. So the notion of path is coming to appreciate that we can actually meet ourselves right where we are. And that furthermore, that we can experience a kind of intelligence about things and a kind of intelligence in our experience if we're open to it. So again, it goes along with the notion that the Dharma is thought-provoking in the beginning. Because ordinarily we look at things that we see as problematic as something that we want to eliminate and get rid of. As an example of moving away from that kind of thinking and moving toward a sense of path, one of the things I remember studying at Naropa was some things about how psychology works in terms of a medical model idea where there's suffering and you just want to eliminate suffering. And the problem with that approach, particularly from a medical point of view, is that we don't learn from what's happening. The example given was that if someone has heart disease, for instance, that, yeah, it obviously makes sense to treat that with, whatever kind of surgery or stents will alleviate the immediate problem, but that there's an intelligence in the whole thing that goes beyond just eliminating the problem, eliminating suffering. And that, in fact, that kind of illness, that kind of disease can be a real message about how someone's living their lives and what they might want to do differently, what they might want to change in terms of diet or lifestyle. So that by opening ourselves to our experience fully, we develop a sense of path, a sense that we can change. In terms of meditation practice, that was meant to be a sort of a metaphor for the notion of path, that we actually open ourselves further through the journey, rather than judging ourselves as lacking something and simply trying to eliminate problems. He says that, that it's good at the beginning because that provides inspiration and ground, whereas good in the middle is a description of the path itself. And here again, we can think about this in terms of meditation practice. He says that it's straight and narrow, gray and dull, and perhaps in some sense uninviting. And in particular, what he's talking about is the only people who would be interested in pursuing such a path are people who would like to surrender ego. People who don't want to surrender ego would regard this kind of path as ludicrous. But what we come to understand through our study and practice is that holding on to ego is the very source of suffering, the very source of difficulty. And if we don't, again, come to some understanding of the nature of suffering, the nature of ego, It's difficult to traverse the path because we'll have difficulty letting go. We'll have difficulty seeing what we need to do, where we need to go. And that when we do, then we come to understand the straight and narrow path, particularly in terms of meditation practice, where regardless of how entertaining thoughts might be, regardless of how anxiety-provoking thoughts might be, no matter how pleasurable or unpleasurable, we regard them as all the same, and we keep coming back, and we keep coming back, and we keep coming back. And in that way, we discover something about settling ourselves and being able to open ourselves to ourselves. So he basically says this kind of questioning, looking at the nature of suffering, looking at the nature of ego, looking at the nature of our actual experience as it is, rather than our experience the way we hope it might be or fear it might be, we come to understand something of the grayness of the path. And for this reason, he says Dharma is very good, very basic, and very definite. And particularly in the beginning, when we're working primarily with shamatha meditation, it comes down to being able to not wander, to begin to tame the mind so that we're not going from situation to situation in such a way that we're not able to actually see where we are or what we're doing, so that we develop some sense of undistractedness. And that this happens not by creating a goal, but by allowing ourselves to settle, allowing ourselves to relax in meditation practice. So for this reason, he says Dharma is good in the middle because it's presented without too much effort. If there's too much effort, that again generates struggle. As John said, Shine means dwelling in peace. So in peace, there's no struggle, there isn't effort. It's more a matter of just settling down into the awareness that's already here. And that our attempts to create something that we think is better actually get in the way of that. For this reason, Trungpa Rinpoche says that Dharma is presented without the extremes of eternalism or nihilism, which are two terms that really come up in the Mahayana, but basically here he defines this as feeling that things are either always good or always bad. But basically they refer to the primary way in which we develop fixed ideas about things, fixed ideas about ourselves, fixed ideas about the world. And we see things as either always going to be one way or another, or we give up completely and feel that there's no meaning to anything or no point to anything. So that either eternalism or nihilism can become a real challenge to our practice because we get so caught up really in conceptual mind. So anyway, because it's reasonable, it's effortless to present, so that through meditation practice, we develop more and more of a sense of the possibility of continuous openness. And then it's good at the end because it's passionless. It leads us out of bargaining mentality. So what this means is we become increasingly aware, perhaps, as we engage in meditation practice, of how often we're looking for something different, how often we want something better, how often we're judging ourselves or judging our experiences lacking in some way. And we get caught up in hope and fear, hope that things could be better, fear that they'll be worse or stay the same and they won't change in the direction that we think is better. And as we come to understand what passionlessness means, we begin to give up all these strategies that are based on hope and fear, all the strategies that come out of looking for something different, always looking for a different now. So as he says, there's no deal. We're not going to get anything out of it. In fact, you might get something you don't like. But this is from the point of view of ego. What we're really working with is being able to let go completely. He says passionlessness doesn't mean difficulty with lovers, but that it's more the equivalent of a sense of humor. This comes back to joy again, the sense of joy that comes with freshness, with experiencing the immediacy of things, the energy of things. It's the equivalent of a sense of humor, because there's less struggle. And through meditation practice, we begin to experience more workability with ourselves and with the situations that we encounter in the world. And for that reason, he says there's a quality of delight in which we see everything clearly and face reality with a smile and without complaint. He also says, though, to say it's good at the end is deceptive because there is no particular end. He says the notion of an end is purely a conceptual concept. We think that we're in a present situation, and when that situation is over, we'll be in the future. But the sense of end continues. But in other words, there's only the present. There's always the present. There's only path. There's only continuous awareness. It's not that we achieve some fixed state or some conceptual idea, but that we're always coming back to the notion of path, which is why some of Trungpa Rinpoche's books emphasize this very point. The path is the goal, is the title of one book. And another title of another book is Journey Without Goal, because goal orientation, again, leads us to struggle in meditation practice. There are things that are pointed to for us to recognize, but if we try to create or fabricate experiences, we'll go astray in meditation practice. For this reason, he says that in presenting Dharma, we're not supposed to give a pitch or advertise the possibility of enlightenment on the spot. In other words, to say there's an end, because it leads to goal orientation. And he makes another interesting statement. He says, one could say that the Dharma is the realization of one's nature, but that sounds corny. So as he says, let me rephrase it. Dharma is the realization that ending is not possible. So take a moment to think about that. How is Dharma is the realization that ending is not possible, a rephrase of Dharma is the realization of one's nature? Or how is Dharma is the realization of one's nature, a rephrase of realization that ending is not possible? And I think my guess, although probably I should just give a hint like he says and stop there, but that's not, I don't know. I tend to overdo things a little bit. Is it comes down to continuous awareness, which in itself is ungraspable and boundless. Anyway, he says there is no end. Nobody's going to be saved. We still have to sit with our little depression, our little pain, or bigger pain. We have to be with whatever we're experiencing. So that Dharma is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end, because there is continuous awareness. In the next section, he talks about profundity and vastness. And he says that Dharma, true Dharma, the higher Dharma, is profound because it penetrates our system. And by this, basically, what we're talking about is that Dharma is personal. And it's profound because it has it has an effect on us. It has an impact. It changes how we look at things. It changes how we look at ourselves, how we look at the world, how we feel about things. And he also says it's vast because when we think we've experienced the truth, we realize the truth means much more than we expected. So in a sense, you could say another way of saying this is that the Dharma, the understanding that we develop through our practice and through our study, is essentially boundless. That in giving up fixed ideas, we experience more and more just the boundless nature of true awareness. And then he kind of sums up what we've been talking about so far, in that he says on the basis of Shila, or discipline that John talked about, we learn to hold ourselves together. And again, there are a lot of different ways to think about what it means to say we hold ourselves together. But one way is to say that we have some sense of what it means to be present rather than being distracted or scattered. Sometimes Trungpa Rinpoche talked about meditation practice as synchronizing body and mind, body, speech, and mind, meaning that mind and body are in one place. Because most of the time our body is in one place, but we spend a lot of time in daydreams and fantasies, so our mind is somewhere else. It can be years in the past, daydreaming about some event in the future, thinking that we're wishing that we were someplace else. And all of that involves some desynchronization of body and mind. But with Shila, we learn to hold ourselves together, be present, one place, right here, right now, as John and Dan would say. So on the basis of Shila, we learn to hold ourselves. And on that basis, we attain a state of meditation or samadhi. So this again is probably emphasizing a little more the shamatha element, but that we develop a sense of steadiness or stability. We're settled in one place. We're able to slow down or simplify enough that we begin to see, because we're not distracted or we're not caught up in one drama after another. we're actually able to see where we are, how we are, right on the spot. And out of that, through the development of knowledge or prajna, so shila, samadhi, prajna, out of that, through the development of knowledge or prajna, we analyze the situation as it should be. So as it should be is an interesting phrase here. Basically, I think at this point, we're talking more about vipassana awareness, knowing things as they are. But as it should be could also say that we're able to be awake, aware on the spot, so that we're able actually to, again, see things as they are, rather than how they appear to a confused mind. He says that the presentation of higher Dharma, Sadharma, is free from the kleshas, passion, aggression, and ignorance that John talked about. It's experienced by the threefold logic of personal experience, theory, and contemplation. So personal experiences, I think this connects to what's called the three prajnas, which will come up about 500 pages later in the book, interestingly. I looked it up. But basically, personal contemplation means that we actually come to think about the Dharma, experience the Dharma as personal experience, not something that's external to us, but how we actually are, how we actually experience things, how the world actually is. Theory would be what we learn, what we read, what we hear, what we listen to. And confirmation would be what we experience in meditation practice, where we come to experience some of the truth of what we study and what we contemplate. We develop some realization of the truth of the things that we're studying. He says, when we hear the Dharma, it's joyful in the beginning. Again, back to freshness and joyfulness. In the middle, it's simple and true, which is just, again, the quality of path, quality of opening ourselves to ourselves, which is what the path is. And in the end, it transcends passion. And then it's profound and vast. And he says that this applies to all the yanas. So then the next section is definitions of Dharma. And by the way, one reason why we have all these lists and descriptions is the chapters in this book are a compendium of several different seminary talks. So it's not that in one talk he necessarily would have presented all of this material, but over different seminaries in describing true Dharma, he might have presented some of this information. And then in a later seminary, with the understanding that people would have read and studied transcripts from previous seminaries, he would then present further material. Basically, he says here there are 10 traditional definitions of Dharma, that it's what's knowable, it's path, it's freedom from pain. It's a perception of mind, by which I think he means that in the Buddhist Abhidharma, which we'll talk about very briefly in a moment, that mental events are considered dharmas with a small d. These are all kinds of feelings and cognitions of various kinds that are identified in the Abhidharma, which is essentially a Buddhist psychology. But the last one, the last Dharma, is particular religious beliefs. And he says 9 of the 10 refer to common meanings of the term Dharma. The only definition that refers to true Dharma is the 10th. Dharma is particular religious beliefs in the sense of a religious sect. So what he's talking about here are the Buddha's actual teachings. And that's Dharma with a capital D. And in this context, I actually wanted to read just a brief excerpt from a different teaching, a different teacher actually, about the word Dharma, because I think it kind of goes right along with these 10 definitions of Dharma that Trungpa Rinpoche talks about. So I'm just going to read just an excerpt. Dharma is a Sanskrit word which has 10 meanings, of which 2 are of primary importance. One corresponds very closely to the English word thing, and the other one corresponds very closely to things like spirituality or religion or something. The etymology of Dharma is that it means that which holds. So it is related to words like dar, D-H-A-R, as in Vajradhara, Vajra holder. Things are called dharmas because they retain the characteristics that make them identifiable as the particular things that they are. On the level of relative truth, because this chair retains or maintains the characteristics which are recognizable as characteristics of a chair, it's appropriate to call that thing a chair. That is the etymological reason for using the word dharma when you mean thing. So I hope that wasn't too confusing, but the basic idea is that 9 of the 10 definitions refer to Dharma as thing, but the 10th one refers to Dharma as religious, the religious sect. So we're running out of time, so I'm just going to say a couple more things and then maybe leave time for some questions and answers. He goes into some description of the sutras and shastras. The sutras being the teachings of Buddha, and the shastras being the teachings that are made by commentators and students of the Buddha after in a period of time after the Buddha up till today. So you could think of Trungpa Rinpoche's comments and presentations of shastras, for instance. But again, it's pointed out that because they're free of the kleshas, that Dharma is always presented properly and fully. Dharma is always said for the benefit of sentient beings. It's meant to wake us up. It's meant to help us. It's meant to support us in the path. It's always said that teachers, it's always being said and manifested because teachers have a sense of duty and mindfulness. Therefore, the teachings are continuous. He says that nothing is hidden and that it's always workable, meaning that it's presented in accord with students' capabilities. In much the same way, he talks about information and understanding with 4 categories of information, saying first, the subject is meaningful, that it applies to our personal journey on the path. This is another way of talking about the Dharma as being profound. Again, that it's meaningful to us. It has a personal application. It's not just external to us, but it actually speaks to the very heart of our experience. That the language is clear, that it's understandable and has no impurities because it's free of the kleshas again. That it transcends confusion. In particular, he talks about here again transcends confusion of the 3 worlds. I was going to say transfusion, but that's not the right word. And finally, it leads to gentleness, that there's a change in our personality, and that this is something that should develop out of our Dharma practice if we're able to practice properly. That over time we have less aggression, less complaining. There's less struggle with the world, less struggle with ourselves, less complaining. And he also says less exuberance for making ourselves a hero or a guru. In other words, we give up the sense of ego-driven self-aggrandizement, a sense of self-importance, a sense of needing to constantly boost and promote ourselves. And then he talks very briefly about the 5 songs of Dharma, that it's like thunder, because it shakes basic ego structure. This goes all the way back to good in the beginning because it throws us back, wakes us up. It's like a flute because it takes our discursive thoughts and turns them into and perverted views and changes them into something more melodic, romantic, or melancholy tune. And this is because through a practice of meditation, we develop less attachment to our thinking. We come to realize we don't need to believe everything we think. There's less solidity to how we hold on to things. So therefore, this makes our experience more melodic, like a flute. It's soothing to the mind because the Dharma speaks to different levels of our mind. In other words, again, it speaks to that awake part of us, that different levels of mind is very much like the section of the book that John was describing where it's like meat to a lion. It wakes something up in us. It's already there. It's always there, but we haven't recognized it. We haven't attended to it. We haven't been open to it because we're distracted, confused, caught up in kleshas. It's clarifying because it clears the mind and provides insight. And it's never contradictory, and it's cutting. And he says it might go against our expectations and wishes, and then we might experience complaint and resistance. But basically, it should be workable. I'll just end with just a few sentences right from the end of the chapter, and then we have just a few minutes, I guess. In studying Dharma, we are studying our complexity and simplicity put together. Our complexity is really all the things that's created by ego, because essentially, Dharma in one sense is very simple. It's as simple as what we do in meditation practice, where we learn to just come back, where we learn to recognize when we're present and just settle into awareness. It's that simple. The complexity is in all of the strategies and all of the fantasies and all of the stories that we tell us with ego. So in studying Dharma, we're studying our complexity and simplicity put together. We have to sort out all the possibilities. We have to understand the meaning of anger, joy, jealousy, pain, and pleasure. And this is, I think, the key thing. We have to understand who we are. And that continues not just in the Hinayana, but through the Mahayana and Vajrayana as well. We have to understand who we are. And he closes by saying, that is Dharma, basic reality. We're just being. We're just being. We're learning how to live our life. We're protecting our being so that we can help others and build an enlightened world. So with that, a few minutes left for some discussion and questions, and just open it up to everyone.
I'd also like to invite you all to come to the group discussion, if you don't already, that takes place on Wednesday night after meditation. I think it can be very helpful, and there's a sense of community that has developed, and I think you might benefit from it.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So we talk about theory, and our mind takes us off onto different theories and judgments and various places. So what's an indication that we've hit on the truth? What's an indication that we've landed on something that's the truth?
Alarm bells go off. No, I'm kidding. I think it's a matter of your own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And also what can help is to discuss it with another person on the path, another student or teacher like Michael or me, and to talk it out, and to see if things are making sense. Michael, do you have any?
And I think some of the things that he described in terms of becoming less solid in our thinking, more open, less caught up. And I think we know the difference between when we're distracted and when we're not. It's, in one sense, again, it's very simple.
He said in the early part of the chapter that it depends on our intuition, that we exercise in exercising your intuition, you're exercising your intelligence, and that you have to begin to trust that and follow that more and more. And I think if the intuition becomes louder and louder and more firm and full of confidence as you go along the path, as one does. And there are discoveries, endless discoveries, that from the very beginning of the path on, where you sort of aha moments in which your intuition is confirmed at deeper and deeper levels of the teachings.
I know for myself that when I first started on the path, the truth wasn't so easily accepted. You know what I mean? When you see things about yourself, how you've been going in the wrong direction your whole life, the truth doesn't always have to be joyful or peaceful or something. It can be alarming at first, the truth, and then clarity comes in. Then there's more truth, and I think that truth leads to the path away from the first truth, that maybe a behavior or a thought or a story, right? That we were caught up in. So you've got your first truth as being something that shakes you up, and then the truth continues on to bring you out of that. So I asked that question because I find that the truth isn't just one answer. It's just not one thing. It can lead you in different directions. At least that's how I've experienced the truth.
Well said.
I think you answered your own question right there.
And gave us a teaching.
Thank you.
We realized the extent to which over the years, sometimes, the teachings have come through as like a gift. Other times they're very painful because they are an attack on my ego, showing me my egotism that I've been exercising. And both aspects at least come into play. So what you just said rang very true.
Okay, good. Thank you for letting me share that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I find sometimes the teachings that I get are very painful.
Yeah, I can share one right now that I experienced probably within the first maybe year of my path, which is going on probably 8 years now. And you know how we pray, may all be free from suffering, right? We pray I think it's the dedication prayer, may all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, may all embrace happiness and the causes of happiness. And you can insert your own name or you can insert someone else's name. And so I had a family member that I would be, that I would insert in there, may so and so be free from suffering. And then I learned that a lot of the person suffering, that I was causing a lot of that person suffering. And that was so painful for me. It was so painful to my ego that I thought I was doing the right thing in certain areas, but it was totally not. And I had to stop doing certain things and behaving certain ways. And that eliminated that person's suffering. It was like, wow, this is just not expected. We just expect some magical thing to happen. And I'd have to say that, a lot of the truth is, not been real pleasant. So that's just one of my examples.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I would just jump in to follow up on that to say a magical thing did happen. That's wonderful insight, and it's a wonderful resolution. The system works, right?
Yeah, first you get this, and then you get the path, to healing. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? We'll close. Well, please come on Wednesday night and contribute. It's a lot of fun. You have a good time. And thank you, Caroline. That was really
Thank
fun.
you so much. Thank you so much.
Should I put the chants up, Michael? You think? Are we done?
Yeah, Trip. Trip's not here, so.
I'll lead them then.
Okay.
So we'll close with a prayer for peace, and then by dedicating the merit generated from our practice to the benefit of all sentient beings. I'm going to mute all so that we don't get cacophony. And we can unmute. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all of the maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll try and leave more room for conversation next time.
Yeah, and John, your computer made it to the end.
It did.
Yep.
No, I know, amazing.
Woohoo! All right.
Yeah.
Stop recording now while we're ahead.
Okay. Stop it right now.